Hi there, I'm E, and this is not your father's 2 cents. Have you ever wanted something so badly that you bought it even when you didn't have the money for it? Well, that's become even easier nowadays with a little thing called Buy Now, Pay Later. A recent bank rate survey found that nearly 2 in 5 Americans have used at least one Buy Now, Pay Later service. Now, these services allow customers to split purchases into a series of interest-free installments. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, it doesn't come without its problems. That same survey found 56% of Buy Now, Pay Later users say they've experienced at least one problem like overspending, missing payments, even regretting purchases entirely. Joining me today is Ronnie Thompson, financial advisor and founder of True North Advisors located in Metro Detroit. Hi, Ronnie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, Alyssa. Thanks for having me.
So talk to me a little bit about Buy Now, Pay Later. Have you encountered a lot of clients who are struggling with this? Have you seen do you think it's becoming more popular? What are your thoughts on it?
So, yeah, it's definitely been something that has become a lot more popular and discussed. And I know that there's several kind of survey entities out there that have provided some information about some significant increases in the use of this program. I will tell you within my client base, I find that a lot of younger clients that I have are using it and finding, opportunities within, current economic environments with inflation and things of that nature that has kind of squeezed most people's dollar down to something less than $1. And so it's an opportunity that has kind of been made available in the moment to help people kind of make their income go a little bit longer.
Yeah, it definitely, and it's funny too, even with how this, when I was thinking of this topic, back in the day, it was layaway. I remember my mom taking me shopping for school, and we would spend hours in there and buy all these things, and then it would go on layaway, and she would, it would be left there. I wouldn't even have the item. So what's interesting to me now about this, Buy Now, Pay Later, is people are, getting the item before even paying for it at all.
Correct.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely... So the nature of Buy Now, Pay Later, and what makes it a little bit unique to layaway, and you mentioned a couple, right? That with layaway, it's, I want this item, and I'm going to pay for it over time, and then when it's paid for,
then
I can take the item, right? Or when I have the money later, I'll come and pay for it and take the item. Here, to your point, yeah, there's opportunity to get the item and not even yet have made a payment. And the other real big benefit to this is in a lot of cases, they provide contracts that are non-interest bearing. So typically when you're getting an item and effectively using somebody else's money to purchase it, just like any other debt instrument, like a credit card, there's going to be significant interest rates on there, which is the revenues that these type of strategies and companies providing them are making. So I think the real attraction here is being able to get something now you need now, may not have the access money to purchase it, and not only that, but be able to pay for it over time and doing it within a contract where you don't have to pay interest.
Right. How can you pass it up?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, absolutely.
What do you think are some of the cons of this?
Sure. So this is, I think people need to look at this no different than any other debt instrument, right? I mean, one of the things I will tell you that I talk a lot about with all walks of life in my day-to-day being a financial advisor is all sorts of debts, right? You have mortgages, you have car payments, you have credit card debts, you have student loans, and how are we navigating the debt side of any type of financial situation? And when it comes to this is really no different, just a little bit of a different flavor and approach to any other debt instrument, no different than a credit card. Now, there's obviously inherent advantages up front that are given, but the analogy that I give people to think about is, perks for credit cards. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I explain to clients is that's good, and getting free flights and cheaper gas and all sorts of things that come from those perks are really good. But the question that I think people need to ask themselves is, how are those perks being paid for? Right. And we have to assume that these credit card companies are not, they're not Santa Claus. They're not going to just be giving money to people. The payments for those amazing perks are typically coming in the form of payments that individuals are now having to make on large interest rates. Many credit cards are over 25%. So if you figure there's a bunch of people sitting in credit card debt and they're paying 27% on top of the minimum payment each month, and you figure a lot of these credit card companies have millions of users,
right,
you start to begin to realize where these perks are coming from and why they can, in some cases, be very good.
Which is insane, because even when you put it that way, you're getting these perks based off of people paying on what they can't afford, if that makes sense.
Correct.
Like, everyone's paying these crazy rates and kind of swapping and moving money around, but nobody has the money to be doing it.
Absolutely. Well, and that's why I would say for anything like buy now, pay later, credit cards, what I tell clients is to gain the advantage, and there are advantages, but to gain the advantage, there is one characteristic that is key, and that's financial discipline, right? If you don't have an idea of what your monthly cash flow is, if you don't have an idea of how much of that money that you are typically spending on a month-to-month basis versus how much money you're actually making, and then you're a little tight on money, which for a lot of people, this is the reason they engage these services, because if you had the money, why not pay for it?
Right.
Right? Then that's when these situations start to become negative, right? Because the other con to this is, even though up front they're offering you non-interest bearing environments, if you don't pay for it in the time allotted, which, sometimes it's 3 months, sometimes it's 6 months, the max I've seen is a year on some of these platforms that they give you of interest free.
Yeah.
Then you run into not only the environment we talked about with the credit card interest, but oftentimes there's significant additional penalties associated, right? Because they've given you this non-interest bearing period, and I've had situations like this in the past. I mean, when I was a kid and a lot less smart with my money, I remember I had a Best Buy TV I had bought, and it was interest free for a year, and I just was paying minimum payments, and next thing you know, I'm 30 days past due on the final payment, which was a bigger number because I was only doing minimum payments, and I owed like double what I would have if I just paid for the TV up front.
Yes, I feel like that is. I'm glad that you bring that up, because I wasn't late, thank goodness, but I did I got a credit card from like Gardner White for a couch. And you know how you can like get those and then you make like the payments. If you make it like within a year or whatever, they don't charge interest. But then like once you miss, like you said, it's like double the amount.
Yep.
I ended up being able to pay it off, but I remember it's almost like so easy to forget that stuff too, because you already have whatever it is that you bought. Like you're already using it every day. You have it. So it's easy to forget, like, oh, I still have to pay for this.
Absolutely.
Like I was so
and they
worried.
know that.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely. And they know that, right? I mean, it's part of it is like, here's the analogy, and we've all done this before, I'm sure, right? It's the free month of Disney Plus.
Right.
Right. Or the free month of this program. Right. And we sign up, and then next thing you know, it's 6 months later and you paid 5 months of
something you never used.
Right. And not even used it. Right. Because you just needed to watch that TV show or that sporting event that one time and did the free subscription. And next thing you know, you paid these guys 4 months of their services.
Right. And they're loving it, because that's,
Absolutely.
like, I've even done this, like watching movies or something like that on TV, like if I don't have a HBO subscription or a Stars or whatever, and I want to watch something like I can only find it on a service I coincidentally don't have. You sign up for that free trial, and then I'll go on my phone and like put it in the calendar when the month is up. Like, don't forget to cancel this. So because it's so easy to do that. Even like when I had that couch, I just remember like the whole just. Like even my mom was like, do not forget to pay that. Like that couch has to be paid off by February, whatever. Like your interest is going to be crazy. When is it appropriate to do buy now, pay later?
So I'm always very cautious about, kind of the one size fits all with everybody. But I think the answer to that, I think is kind of, again, going back to first and foremost, I would, there's got to be a general idea or understanding of, your budget. Right. And I know that's an ugly word for a lot of people, but, this is very important to be able to identify what is on the table for affordability, because obviously we don't want to be in a situation where we want something immediately that we may not even need, right? And we want to go out and buy that today because we want it today. And we're not really contemplating anything beyond, well, this is an interest-free payment, and why wouldn't I do this? And I can get the thing I want now today. So I think that's first and foremost is, when looking at something like this, don't just, hey, it's a free year of interest-free and I'll deal with it later, right? Sit down and really identify what is reasonable for you to purchase. So I think, the size and the price, I think is a major factor. Obviously, the bigger the item, the harder it's going to be to facilitate payments, certainly if you're not in a position to pay it up front. What I have found with this and where I found, several individuals that I know that have used this appropriately is I need something now. Maybe I'm in a position where my income is not consistent, or I'm expecting a tax return in April and it's January, and I've got this, wedding I got to go to, and I can't really afford this suit, but I got to get a suit, or, I've got, something I got to, have at my house for a certain thing that's coming up, and I know I've got this money coming to pay for it. I just don't have it in the moment.
Right.
Those I think are going to be better choices for something like this than I don't have the money. I may not have the money in the future, but this thing's going to offer me at least a year to figure it out. That's where I think people are going to find themselves in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. Because it's so easy, like we were saying, to just, it doesn't take priority right now, so I'll worry about it later. And then you keep doing that, and then at some point there's no more laters.
Sure. Well, and this is where this I would say here is where the financial discipline part of this is really what facilitates people being able to use programs like this to their advantage. So let's talk about the last year, right? So I've got 20 grand in an account that I don't necessarily need, or $10,000 in an account that I don't necessarily am using. I want to buy an item that's going to cost, $5 to $8 grand.
Right.
Well, if I've got the money to pay for it, but let's say this is January of 2023 and interest rates have gone historically high to where I can go to at some credit unions and banks during 2023 and get 4.5% and 5% returns on that 10 grand.
Yeah.
And I can buy this item through buy now, pay later and keep my money and have an interest-free loan for a year. Well, I just made 5% on 10 grand, and maybe that covers a portion of the cost of that item, right? So that's where you can really utilize programs like this if you're financially disciplined to leverage debt to your benefit.
Why do people maybe choose like buy now, pay later over just putting it on a credit card? What's the attractiveness of it?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, one of the things that is a factor of buy now, pay later that I have seen is many of these programs are providing these opportunities for people with substandard credit.
Yeah.
So I think, one piece here is there are going to be some people out there that may not qualify for a credit card, or may not qualify for a credit card that is, the balance that they would need, right, to pay for the things that they need. Right. So that I would say is issue number one as to why people would choose this is you have a credit score that may not warrant you being able to get credit cards. Right. And this certainly could be somebody that, hey, I had an issue when I was younger. I did some stupid stuff with credit cards and money, and, I'm working my way out of it, but, I need some money now and I can't get that. Right. So I think that's piece one. I think the second is, with credit cards, typically it's a month to month.
Right.
Right. So you got, in some cases, 27% APRs looming if you're not able to pay the balance off on a month-to-month basis. Right. So here, this provides a much longer period of time. I think some of the shorter ones are 3 months, some of the longer ones are a year, that provide you a period of time where you don't have to make any payments or interest, and you're not going to get dinged with some high interest rate.
Right. I also feel like, too, kind of going back to what you were saying about like the impulse buying, like I need it today and this makes it easy for me to get it today. Do you think this has any correlation to maybe impulse buying or to developing bad shopping habits? that kind of thing? Like, do you think this has made that even more of a challenge? Because it's already easy when you go on to Amazon or whatever else online to get like the 2-day shipping or these, that makes it even easier. It's easy to buy it because it just takes a button to click it. And then in some cases, like if you're a Prime member, you're getting that same day or the next day. And now if you're telling me I also don't have to pay for it right now, like I just feel like that is just so much kindling to a potential fire.
Well, and so I think you're spot on, and I think you'd be silly not to recognize that these are for-profit entities. Now, does that necessarily mean they're all bad and they all have bad motives, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there are individuals that could use programs as I've described like this
right.
to their benefit, right? But I think that these companies are very clear when you start getting into things like, AI and cookies.
Oh,
I mean, they clearly understand our behavior and clearly understand, what individual consumers are looking for. And so I think when you really think about the timing of something like this, right, and you think about the inflation monster that's kind of been looming in economics for the last, 18 months, 2 years. So there's been a heavier squeeze on cash flows naturally as things have, several things are 30, 40, 50% more expensive today than they were, 3-4 years ago. And so when you start to look at that, right, it's kind of a perfect storm to also, say, okay, the individual consumer has less money to spend, but obviously, the individual consumer is very sporadic, much more so than older generations in buying what they want when they want it. Right. So here comes a program that effectively offers you the ability to buy something you don't have the money to pay for and give you some time to kind of figure it out. Right. And ultimately I think they're clear on, the probability of those engaging in something like this, maybe not having the financial discipline to take advantage of it and find themselves in a situation where they're just accruing debt, but it's just a different phase this time, right, than the typical credit card or student loan.
Right. Exactly. Interesting. Yeah. I'm curious to kind of see, like, with even you mentioning like AI with technology just advancing at the rate that it is, what the future is going to hold.
Yeah, so it's funny. I'll share a quick story. I was actually on family vacation a couple weeks ago, and one of my wife's family members is dating a guy who is in AI. He is the CEO and president of a startup tech company in Tennessee, and so him and I were kind of sitting around chatting. It was the first time I had met him. Kind of had a little bit of a background. Because the cousin is my client. So, and I had actually had a review meeting with her. So we were chatting a little bit about the situation and this guy and the company, and she's working for him. And so we were just chatting, and his company was utilizing AI to work with, they had built out some coding and an algorithm where they were going into these bigger companies and saying, we use AI to effectively, and this is a little bit of a simplistic breakdown, but effectively go out and figure out what the trends are.
Wow.
The AI will give a description to all of the items you have listed on your e-com website, and then what it will naturally do over time is begin to naturally flow the marketing of products that people are more interested today in on an organic and natural basis. So, if certain trends in fashion, let's say, are X, it will recognize that through the AI, and then it will facilitate through its product line those items in which fit that description and put that out into the forefront organically on the website.
Wow.
That's just like surface level, right? Like that's just like we're just getting started.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I'm curious to see where all of that goes.
Absolutely. Well, it goes back to like, they know what we're interested in. They know what we're doing, right? Like we joke all the time, right? And I'm sure you've had this situation where it's like, you're not even online. You're sitting in a room having a conversation with somebody about, a kayak or a trip you want to take or an item you were thinking about buying. And then you end up on some social media platform, and all of a sudden you're getting a bunch of ads for that item.
Right. Right. It's hard to escape. Like, that's even conversations I've had before on this show is kind of talking about, like, how it's just so easy now to buy it. And it's hard to escape it because with, like, social media, we all have these computers in our hands all the time. In your downtime, you're scrolling. You know, we all do it on our phone. But there's an ad on almost every single platform now. There's ads on Facebook, ads on Twitter, ads on TikTok. It's just, TikTok has like a store now where they're trying to sell you stuff all the time. Like, it's just,
Absolutely.
It's almost like, when's enough going to be enough, or what's the tipping point?
Well, and I think to that point, right? Like, it's the recognition for the fact that ads are what's deriving the revenue, right? I mean, it's like, the Super Bowl, right? I'm a football fan, but even football fans tend to watch the Super Bowl in part because of the commercials, right? I mean, that's become a big tradition with the Super Bowl, right? Is the commercials.
Right.
And part of that is, the amount of money that these companies are spending for seconds of airtime, right? Because of the eyeballs, and so whether it becomes like a YouTube content creator or, the social media platform itself, ads is what's really deriving the revenue, right? Which is in turn why we were able to set up a TikTok account for free and a YouTube account for free and a Facebook account for free, right? Is because the revenues are being generated by ads. And of course, most of these companies that are free are some of the richest companies when it comes to revenues on an annual basis in this country, because ad revenue is usually very, very fruitful. So, that is, again, this is, the side of capitalism where they're dealing with consumers, that seems to be what's driving a lot of our engagement.
Right. So with the name of this show being Not Your Father's 2 Cents, I like to kind of end the episode with you giving listeners your 2 cents. So kind of when it comes to buy now, pay later, what is your overall thoughts, advice, cautions that people should be aware of if they're going to use it?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think for most people, this is probably not a great idea. I mean, if I'm just being totally candid up front, because again, it's a debt instrument. And my general experience is that most Americans are not financially disciplined enough to take advantage of the finite areas of advantage that exist in these programs.
Right.
And so I think, it's very much a response by these companies to the current economic environment and the issue that consumers are running into, that they're not able to consume as much financially, at least with the income that they're deriving, as they were years ago. And so I think it's an avenue that has been open that I think for the most part, and I'm not going to say it's a negative motive per se that these companies are taking, because we're all adults and we have to be responsible for our decisions. But I would say that for most people, unless you really, have the financial discipline to engage in something like this and have a clear understanding of what that's going to look like from start to finish,
right,
I think you're going to find yourself in trouble. And I think it comes back to those who are using this program. If you don't have a simple budget, right? And I tell people it doesn't have to be rocket science. I tend to approach this thing with, like, I call it the minimalist budget. It's not something I made up. It's out there, right? And it's a 50-30-20.
Mm-hmm.
So 50% of your expenses are fixed. So cell phone, mortgage, rent, car payment, right? The stuff that's coming every month.
Right.
Then you have 30% for personal. That's going out to eat, hanging out with your buddies, going to sports events, getting your hair cut. And then saving is 20%. And so what I encourage people to do is, especially before engaging something like this, is you should have something at least at that level, right? To clearly understand what are my cash flows, because that's going to help guide you in, what you can expect for doing something like this, whether it's this or any other debt instrument.
Right. Well, I think that's great advice. Thank you so much for being on with me today.
Absolutely.
It was
Thanks
great.
for having me.
Yes, of course. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. That does it for this edition of Not Your Father's 2 Cents. Sources used in this episode will be in the description, along with a link to Ronnie's website where you can go check him out. Thanks for listening, and I'll meet you back here next week.